enlisted in the Navy when I was just a little bit older than you guys, when I was 17 years old. And after 31 years, they kicked me out, and I retired. And I spent my entire career in the Navy in Navy medicine. First as a hospital corpsman, which is a medic. And I served many years with both the Navy and Marine Corps in many different places. And then I eventually became a PA, which is a physician's assistant. And still in the Navy, still with the Navy and the Marine Corps. And I retired after 30 years. That's me. Okay.
Would you work on ships?
I was on ships. I was on, spent a little bit of time on a submarine, but it wasn't his kind of submarine. It was a World War II submarine. It was
Diesel.
powered by diesel, and it smelled. And my sleeping area was next to a torpedo in the front of the boat.
It's been a little scary.
I only went to one place in the submarine, but as far as the Navy, and I was on aircraft carriers, destroyer, cruisers, but about half of my career I spent on shore with the Marine Corps in different Navy hospitals and Marine Corps bases. And I've traveled all over Europe, a little bit of North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, South America. I spent my last, when I was in the Navy for the very first time, my ship went to Vietnam, but we didn't go ashore. So we stayed off the coast of Vietnam. And I was only there for a very short time, and then I went home, and I went to school, and then stayed in the Navy after going to school. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Were you ever attacked?
Yeah, a little bit, but you don't think about those things.
How long were you like gone when you went to like?
Well, it depends on where we went. You know, gone from home, from my family, from my friends and family and parents. I was gone for about 30 years. But we would be stationed in a base, okay, and that would be your home, your temporary home. And then we would have to deploy. When they say deploy, that means they send you somewhere to, for whatever reasons. And sometimes the deployments would be 6 months. Sometimes they would be 9 months. One time it was a year and a half. So it depends. It's not like submarines, because the submarines, it's very strict. 6, 9 months underwater, then you come home, they give you a break. We're not underwater, and so they can make it last a lot longer sometimes.
So think about that, about 30 years. A lot of you in this classroom are 10 years old. All right? So that's 3 times your age. He was in the Navy. Imagine that. I mean, from the day that you were born up until now,
Exactly.
10, 11 years. Try 3 times that. It's a lot of years.
I'm sorry, go ahead, guys. Yeah, back.
Well, have you spent more time here, or have you spent more time in the Navy?
Well, that's an interesting question. Because years ago, I would have said I spent more time in the Navy, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm spending more time. I still haven't caught up though. Let's see, 30 years in the Navy, and I'm over 60. So yeah, I guess I just made it. I'm over here more now.
Did you do like fun things in the Navy? Like,
I'm sorry?
Did you do like fun things like he did?
Well, I don't know.
Depends on your definition.
It was probably, let's see, if a total time is what, 100%? So I would say 60%, 70% hard work, scared, places I didn't want to be. 30%, the best time of my life. Most excitement, most fun. You make friends that you keep for the rest of your life. I ran into a kid. I was on an aircraft carrier one time, and I'm walking down what we call the hangar deck. That's where you put all the planes when they're not being used. And I'm walking down the hangar deck, and here's this other kid coming, and I was a kid then. I was only like 19 years old. come and I look at him and he looks at me. And I had moved from where I was born many years before. And I looked at this guy, I said, Eddie? He said, Mannie? And we went to kindergarten together.
Wow.
And we had never seen each other since that time.
That's
It was
cool.
so much fun. And the best part was we were on the ship for already we'd been on the ship for 2 weeks before I ran into him. We used to have, how many people live in Flowertown?
Don't know the number of that. I mean,
Okay, well,
I know
can you
there's-
imagine one boat? Pretty big boat. But when we used to leave our home port to go out to sea, and we were fully, manned, and all the flight squadrons were on board, and all the personnel were on board, we shipped out with 6,500 men. No women, just men. It was the old days.
When you went to Vietnam, was that when the Vietnam War was happening? Or
Yeah, it sure was.
So you said 6,000, so it looks like Flowertown, there's about 4,669
So
people.
you can imagine, we left on one ship with more people than live in our entire town. How about that?
Floating cities.
Floating city.
Cool.
The hardest thing was to leave my family. As I was older in the Navy, and I had a family with small children. Mateo's older brother and sister. He has two step brothers and sisters. And the hardest thing was leaving for the Gulf War. And Mateo's older brother and sister were the same age as Mateo is now. And they asked me, Daddy, why are you going to war? Are you going to be, shooting at people? And I said, no, honey, that's not Daddy's job. Daddy's job was not to shoot people or to get involved in the fighting in a direct way. My job was to help the people that got hurt during a combat. And so I told him, I said, when I go to war, I don't go to fight, I go to help. I go to patch people up, try to get them home safe and sound, get them back to their families. But the hardest thing for me in my whole Navy career, and I had plenty of times when I was scared, and I didn't know if I was going to get home, just so many times. But the hardest thing was telling my young children that I had to leave. What did you, sweetie, you had a question and I forgot to answer it. Something about Vietnam?
yeah, I said, but when you're in Vietnam, is that when the Vietnam War was happening?
Yeah, I joined when the Vietnam War was at its highest, and the psychiatrist said I was normal though. But I enlisted, and you know who else was in the Vietnam War? Mateo's granddad. He was a pilot in the Vietnam War, but I was a medic, and but I never had to go into where the battles were actually fought. For whatever reason, there's an old saying, God is my co-pilot. And he shepherded me through my whole career. And here I am still today.
Would you ever bump into your dad, Mateo's granddad?
I'm going to see him at Thanksgiving. Oh, you mean during the war? No, he was there before me. He's a little older than me, please.
I mean, like when you started.
No, Mateo's granddad was in the Air Force,
Yeah.
and I was in the Navy. And we don't talk about the Air Force too much. But that's a joke, because the Air Force does a lot of very difficult, very important work.
Yeah, my granddad was a pilot.
Cool.
We had a former teacher
Oh, yeah.
in Erdheim who was in the Air Force as well. So Mrs. Bradshaw.
Yeah.
we talked
Mrs.
about-
Bradshaw, yeah, she had Mateo. Way back when, she was in the Air Force or Army?
Air
I
Force.
just If you can be in the Navy, which other one would you choose?
Well, I joined the Navy because I wanted to go to the Marine Corps. And because my best friend, his two older brothers were in the Marines. And I used to think they were like, wow, they were the tops. So I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And my dad said, no. So, because he wanted me to go to college. And I said, well, Dad, I don't know what I want to do, and it's only going to waste your money. He says, well, you're not going to the Marine Corps. I said, okay, I'll join the Navy. You know, my father I was too young. My father had to sign. And he says, well, then you're not doing that either. I said, well, if you don't do that, I'll join the Marine Corps later. So he let me join the Navy, and I went to college after I got out the first time, and then I just stayed in. But going to school is a great thing. You learn, and I was very lucky. Not only did I go to the Navy and then go to college, but while I was in the Navy, I learned what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I learned it as a young boy. So I had a career in medicine for 40 years. But if I really think back, it was actually more than 50. Because I started when I was 17. And I actually started when I was 14 because I joined the emergency squad to help people. So it must have been something that was in the back of my head, even when I was a youngster. And I loved every day of my job. I'm retired now too. I'm retired from everything. The only thing I'm not retired from is taking care of this guy.
That's full time.
That's full time.
Everybody else? Yeah, bud.
So, have you been to what's the biggest country?
The biggest country?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, got to be the United States of America.
Country from us?
But, well, I've never been to
Besides
Russia.
America, 'cause America's-
I was in China once, so I guess China would be the biggest country.
Any other lasting questions?
How many people that you had to save and sound were hurt and bad?
The majority, most, it depends, you're not always involved in combat. There's not always a war going on. It seems like a war's been going on forever. This is actually now the longest war that we've ever had. The Iraqi and Afghan war. But when you're, just like Jesse's dad said, the Navy tells you where to go. And they tell you what to do. And it's your job to do it. So, but the one thing about the Navy that's not like the Army, not like the Air Force, the Navy's kind of peculiar because even in peacetime, when you go out to sea, the sea is vast. Look at all that blue. And when you go out to the ocean on a boat, on a ship, it's just you and the ocean. And you always are, when you leave port, you're in harm's way. And anything can happen out there, and you have to be prepared. One of the most frightful things I ever experienced was a fire at sea in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's no alarm to ring other than the one that's on the boat. Nobody's going to come to help you. Everybody becomes a firefighter right there and right then. And you have to save the ship so that you can save yourselves. Yeah, bud.
So were you on that ship that was on fire?
I was on a ship. Fires happen at sea a lot. Sometimes they're pretty easy to put out, and there's no big deal. But when you got a big aircraft carrier, and it has a lot of ammunition on board, and a lot of other things that are combustible, that will ignite, and a lot of fuel for the jets and everything, that can be very serious. Yeah, Kishan.
Do you know how to do you know anybody that was one of the main really?
Excuse me?
Do you know one of your bosses from the?
From the
We just want to know whether he knows someone who's a high-ranking official.
Do I know anybody that's important? Well, they all think they're important. But when I retired, I had 4 admirals, 10 captains, and a bunch of everybody else's at my retirement. I knew some people. My best, the one I know the closest is a good friend of mine who's a retired 2-star admiral. And another good friend of mine who's a retired priest